So what I've done here, and I'll say a couple of opening remarks and then I'll turn to Jeff and we can just go back and forth. Here are all the clips, and we can talk about in a second which ones we think might be most appropriate for a grassroots audience, which ones we think send a simple message that they'll understand, and then they can work going forward on more complex scenarios. And then based on something that Yuya had already put together, on the other wall, I have this chart that I expanded to include the concept of stopping a promising attack in all the various scenarios. And one of the things about this chart is that, on the face of it, it's kind of complex, but I think we need to find some way to distill it down to something simple to allow the group present, the grassroots group present, to really get the picture. Jeff.
Okay, so I think as you had up on the screen to start some of the questions we have to ask, I think the most important thing is, we're gonna teach a 60-minute course on tactical fouls, and we're gonna open it up for you guys to start having a general discussion on some of these things. But first question is, how do you start the clinic? What's some of the things that you would do to get the class attendees started to start thinking about tactical fouls and what we're trying to get accomplished?
So that's a question for people sitting at the table. Yes. What do you think? What's your opening approach?
To me, the opening approach would be, just saying that we're going to review tactical fouls, them, promising attack, high goal obvious current opportunity. Defining those concepts, first.
What resources would you use to do that?
We can use, those resources, obviously, the law 12 explains more about the denying obvious false current opportunity. There's not much about the stop a promising attack, that will refer to the considerations to understand more the concept for that. Then there are other areas, within the laws of the games, like protocols and other areas to review more about DOCSO, but that's pretty much where, with law 12 and considerations. And actually, the consideration has some questions for section for DOCSO as well.
It's my sense, it's my sense that many newer officials, not brand new, but many newer grassroots officials might not have a very good concept at all in terms of what it means to be stopping a promising attack or SPA.
Correct.
How do we prompt them to, I think we should prompt them, give us their sense of how they would define what a SPA is, and then see what they say, and then help them. What do you guys think about educating them on what SPA is compared to DOCSO?
Yeah, I was going to say one way I would probably start is by looking at, just to get him talking, is asking questions as basic as, what is SPA, what is DOCSO? Because you're talking to newer grassroots referees that may not even know what those necessarily are. We throw around a lot of little shortened words of letters and just get them, tell me what DOCSO is, and then from there leading further into, okay, how do you now, what are the things you're looking for when you have defined DOCSO? What are the things you're looking for that make that up? Or what are the things you're looking for in a stopping or promising attack? Just to get them at least talking and conversing with you. So kind of what's defined up on the main screen there is start getting them to give you some of that information back just to know where you're at.
Do you think it's important, if you're talking to grassroots referees that don't have a lot of experience, to even start before that and perhaps lead into tactical fouls by showing a lead up of a few clips maybe that are just showing more simple fouls, leading up from a careless to a reckless type situation before you get into more tactical situations?
I think that the clips on the board that we'll talk about shortly, I think it's incumbent on us when we're just trying to structure our potential class to try to find the videos that send the message most clearly and not terribly complicated, but are a very stark example of spa versus dog soap, and make sure we drive home that concept in their heads right from the start. What do you guys think?
I agree, and I also agree on the whoever said that, Josh, I think that by defining the acronyms. I think it's important to start define the acronyms, but also just give them the framework. That we want to focus on tactical files. Then explaining what spa and dog are. So we want to focus on this. Not severity of the fouls, not what's a foul, what's not a foul. Just going to focus just on these type of concepts. By just being very clear in defining that.
Hey Dina, if you were talking to a group of grassroots people and you wanted to ask them what's the difference between spa and dog show, how would you approach that conversation?
I generally agree with what Ivan's been saying. I don't think the majority of grassroots even think in terms of these terms that we use. And what Jeff said, I think it's really important to identify the different types of fouls. I often ask them, can you tell me about this play here and what you were thinking the player was attempting to do? Therefore, I get them to define the scenario that they experienced, and then I introduce to them a promising attack. And then we start talking whether they felt that that individual intentionally attempted to break up a promising attack. But I'm really of the viewpoint that when you get to grassroots, the majority of these people don't even know these terms that we're talking about.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and probably just to add on to what Dina said is a lot of the referees that are within the first few years are probably, if they haven't had a ton of experience being a referee, they've maybe just played. A lot of it is getting them used to getting used to understanding and recognizing, hey, this is a foul, this is not a foul, and maybe a basic idea of what is a caution and maybe what is a red card. So making sure that those concepts are set up front. Before then, we can start to build on what is stopping a promising attack, what is a dog slow opportunity.
Yeah, see it now.
All right. I was gonna
11, I think you said.
Yeah, the very last one, which I think is a fairly clear example of a spa, or should have been a spa. But what I wanted to,
Yeah, Christie.
I think you have to start it. And why it's a spa. That's the question.
Ooh, tough decision there from.
So what about this video makes this particular instance an example of stopping a promising attack? What factors are present?
Where it is on the field is one.
What else?
Player has control of the ball, direction of the play.
A lot of open space for the player to play into.
Bingo. That's a good one. She has wide open space. She's got options. She would have had options had she not been fouled. She has players she could distribute the ball to.
Face.
Yep.
Defenders.
So what about this play that caused this to be not deemed as such as a spa and no card being given. Put yourself in the mind of the referee why she chose not to.
Potentially lack of awareness of like where defenders and attackers are at that particular moment in time.
And I think something on a grassroots level, there might be, you know, misconceptions at SPA, or confusing that SPA is the same as DOCSO, or, you know, there might be, you know, confusion and misconceptions, and perhaps thinking that those, you know, situations must happen outside or inside the penalty area, not, you know, case that
Okay.
it's, you know, further down.
Okay, Yvonne, so what kind of strategies would you use in the class to try and walk the students through difference between whether this is SPA or DOGSO?
You know, again, you know, it would be how many defenders are involved in the situations, where the defenders are located, the direction of the play.
Could you pick two or three of the considerations from both SPA and DOGSO and walk through each one of those and let the students in the class come to the conclusion of what this should be?
For SPA, I would say like the options that the player has, you know, the direction of the play.
Yep, understand, but how do you get the students to understand that? This is the framework we're trying to understand here. Is you're teaching a class and you're trying to get people to understand, and it's not that you're going to want to stand up in front and do all the talking. So what kind of strategies would you employ to try and get the interaction from the students, from the referees, and in some respects, let them come to the conclusion about what this is and why it's that.
Right,
Do you
right.
I mean,
Yes.
okay.
No, got it. Yep, got it. Yeah. No, I mean, I would ask, you know, if they see a difference between, you know, just a foul and a tactical foul in this situation. Then, you know, see if they can differentiate it, then start asking, you know, what differences they. And as Nicole said, then start using their concepts and their words and how to tie them into the considerations. And it's, so you are thinking about this consideration, right? Or this, you know, it is related to this consideration. But I think, you know, just asking what difference, you know, they see between regular foul and
Maybe one approach would be to start with, you know, once they have a basic understanding of what a DOGSO is, ask them in this particular video clip example, is this a DOGSO? And if so, why? And then we'll have some conversation among the group. And then probably in the end, they'll conclude it's not a DOGSO. And then you can segue into, well, is it a stopping, a promising, an attack? And if it is, why?
Yeah, but I would start by defining between, you know, a regular foul and a tactical foul. And then, okay, once we have consensus it's a tactical foul, then say, okay, you know, do you think it's a SPA or DOGSO? And then, you know, go on from there. Why is one and why is not the other?
This goes back to, I would say, like, if you look at clip 4, like, if that, to me, that one is one that you can use as a starting point to start the discussion of trying to delineate SPA from DOGSO, because you get that high and wide view, like partway through it, and it just gives a lot more talking points, I think, that you can throw those considerations at. I think you just pulled it up, Yuya, but it's probably halfway through. My little reader wasn't going on the time code, so. But yeah, there's a nice view that you could freeze on, and you'd be able to really show highlight some of those considerations of number of defenders and direction and all of those considerations. Yeah, this is it. So once the ball comes back upfield to play, there's a good, you can see when the foul's committed and you can easily pause it there. And now you've got a really good talking point of what you can share with the class to discuss. And yeah, and you get the nice view of the whole half of the field. I mean, you can see most of the players are all in that half. You've got half of the field to go to get to goal. So yeah, there's a lot of the talking points you can draw out of this one. And that's, yeah, and I think that's where you start with to really make it very clear or reinforce the points with everyone. And then you can move into the youth views of here's the fouls you're actually going to see. Because some of these fouls are going to be much more professional in that you're not going to, a newer referee may not pick up on them as easy, but the youth ones are going to be more, here's what you're going to see in your game. And then you have to get them to kind of bridge that with what they're seeing from this viewpoint.
So as we talked, it's important for us, among all the variety of clips we have at our disposal, is to find the ones which paint the clearest picture, the simplest picture for grassroots referees.
And it goes back to what we talked about a little while ago, is how do you prepare for the class? How do you prepare to get started? You know, you even asked the question, you know, on the screen, you know, what clips do you use and what order do you use them in to paint that picture? So I thought both this one and the previous one with Christy, you could have frozen it at the time of the foul. Both of them were a very good look at the spa nature of the foul, because of, you know, the distance between the defenders and you know, one person to beat, you're on goal kind of thing. So both of those have very good viewpoints from that standpoint, Josh. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, then if we can rule out the 4Ds are not going to be met at that particular moment in time, then we can start looking into the P's of possession of the ball, potential for continuing the attack, personnel, and losing my train of thought, but just essentially going into those considerations to then determine whether we do have that stopping a promising attack.
My first thought is the level of play versus the age, because if the level of play is really high, I wouldn't put it past a 13 or 14-year-old to know what a tactical foul is. And so that's the first thing that would cross my mind, is not so much the age, but the level of play. Because you could also have a U16 game where it's a really low level of play and they're clueless. So
I would agree on that. Yeah, I would agree on that. That, you know, it should be based on the level of game, the players, because you're doing like U12 or U13, DA players. They are very young, but I can tell they know what they're doing. There are very few cases that they don't.
But doesn't that come down to the referee making the decision after they recognize whether or not this is a tactical foul or not, and then making the determination whether they're going to discipline that differently based upon the level of play? What we're trying to teach here is this a tactical foul? Is this spot? Is this dog zone? And then going from there, we need the referees to understand what is and what is not, regardless of the level of play. And then we can teach them some of the intricacies behind, does the game need the card?
Yeah, we're teaching the law book, or we're teaching the textbook answer, as opposed to teaching the game management answer.
Well, if we're not instructing the referees what is or what is not a tactical foul, when the time comes, can they recognize what it is or what it isn't, right? We need them to recognize that it is or is not, and then we can teach them what to do about it.
Right.
So we're trying to be standardized. We're trying to have the same call regardless. And I realize I just kind of had a contradiction there because I said then we teach them whether or not we need to discipline it or not with a card or not. But you know, we got to recognize, and we got to have the referees recognize it for what it is.
See, the challenge to us all, especially to the newer referees, is that the law doesn't define specifically or give detail on what it means to stop a promising attack. So almost inevitably, you have to look to considerations, perhaps pick out the ones that might make the point simple way to begin their sense of understanding of what a spot is.
I guess my thought was with all of that, I think those are important. Yet I think more importantly, it would make sense to make sure that everybody knows the concept of dog so spot first, being able to recognize that, then starting to get into what you have on the other screen with regards to the flow chart as to, okay, if I have this and this, I have this decision. If I have this and that, I go to this decision. I think that's probably, if we were going down this path with this, getting the general concept, making sure we have the considerations right is important. And then what's next is also making sure that we have the correct restart and misconduct if possible.
It's so important somehow to teach us to recognize or be able to come to grips with the idea of whether there was an attempt to play the ball or not. In case of both Dogso and...
That's very true.
And I've had a conversation with Yuya about this and how in some way the doubt to the defender that they were trying to play the ball. And that's a tricky concept. So another question that Yuya brought up for us to try to talk about as a group is what kinds of points of emphasis you want to you have your referees leave the classroom with. You know, what can they do in terms of their, for example, movement on the field to try to be able to identify these offenses better? I'm thinking of things like anticipation of attacks toward goal, acceleration, your viewing angle, having the courage to talk to your AR. Those things sort of are part of the overall approach to dealing with these kinds of situations.
Well, the other one I was thinking of, Dean, those are good ones. The other one I was going to see is expanding your field of view at all times, because if you have such narrow tunnel vision at one particular instance, you miss so much more that can actually help put the puzzle pieces together to better determine what you should do at that particular moment in time.
That's very good.
Yep.
I think, that's consideration like positioning and start reading the game, how the teams are playing. If the teams are playing short passes, long passes, if there are, teams relying on one or two players to break away, that they have, speed, trying to identify those, aspects in a particular game and adjust, how far, how close they have to be. And
one thing I would say to your point, Dean, is I would give them at this level something practical that they can take away immediately as well. So something like run with your head up or your chin up. just that little of something, getting them to remember to focus on that a little bit will hit some of these things of expanding the field of vision and those sorts of things.
That's a very good point. You know, part of that as well, related to it, is their body language. We hear this all the time. Their ability to sell the call, you know, is a big deal. And if they look concerned or confused or hesitant, even though they make the right call, their selling ability is low. So one of the questions that you also asked us to talk about together is that how you finish up a session, how you conclude it, what kinds of points you make with the referees that they can take away with and remember, what they can do to get better at identifying these kinds of fouls. What are your thoughts? How do we wrap things up with them?
Dean, without a doubt, giving some kind of bullet point summary of repetitive points is kind of 101 on how to make sure you reinforce what was learned. And so I think that would be important as, you know, or even depending on, you know, not to patronize the group, but just have everybody stand up for a minute and just reset for a minute. And then, okay, here are my final bullet points. Please focus with me here. And that way, that's the last thing that they heard, are the things that you want to make sure you want to get across before they leave.
Like that? I like that.
Yeah, I think a practical principle for presentations, right? You know, you tell them what you tell them, you tell them, and you tell them what you told them. Make sure that everybody's on the same page and they know what SPA and DOCSO is and the differences.
Well, it's certainly hard to imagine having a clinic like this without kind of a subset of these videos to use, because that's the only really way to make these concepts a reality with them, through examples.
Yeah, and the more we're doing, the more videos we have, the easier it is to set the stage.
Yeah, and learning, you know, by nature is easier through, you know, visualization, you know, it's better with videos, images, more than.
I think one other thing of feedback that you can get is invite them to give you one thing that they've learned out of that, to really see how much of the concepts that they've given you, such that if you were to then go on and do this again, you can either add on to it or change your approach on how you do it for a future session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of things we haven't talked about. You know, something as simple as, you know, was the foul at the top of the box in or outside the area, how to maximize your use of the AR. There's a lot of things that go into this, and challenging to distill it down to what kinds of points you want to leave with them in a relatively short session. And I think one of the things we can help our grassroots referees on, we try to encourage them to have the courage to give a card when they need to, because it's perfectly jives with what you just said, that, you know, there really isn't much discretion. You don't want to just ignore those tactical fouls when they occur. So having the courage is part of it.
Dean, having the courage, and then also realizing, I think this was my realization the last week after seeing a few of these clips too. In reality, it feels like on most youth teams, if you get out of there without a tactical SPA foul, yellow card, there's probably something wrong. Like, realistically, these things happen all the time. They might be completely unintentional, but intention is not part of any of those flow charts up there. So from that point of view, when you really start looking at it, these things happen all the time. We've just skirted around it a lot. And I'll fully say I have before. And so I think exactly what you just said there, Dean, is letting them know to have the courage to give it, knowing that not only us as coaches are going to back them up, the MRC is going to back them up, like they're going to have a whole load of support.